Okay, we are going to continue with our discussion on Chapter 4, Phonology. And we're going to start by looking at that concept of the phoneme again and how we determine what is a phoneme. So one of the way phonologists do this is by looking at minimal pairs. So what is a minimal pair? Two words with just one different phoneme. So for example, pan and ban. The two different phonemes are p and b for B. The rest of the word is exactly the same. And technically I should be writing this in the phonetic alphabet to make it clear. But they are, AN sounds exactly the same in both of these words. So the difference in the minimal pair is the first letter, the first sound. Here it's the middle sound that's different. Math, versus me, if. And you can also look at minimal pairs at the end of the word. Versus and sin versus sing. If you change that one sound and it creates a totally different word that has a different meaning, then we know that these are different phonemes. So let's look at some more examples.
Take just two sounds, N and M. To test if speakers hear these two sounds as two phonemes, we see if we can find words where switching one sound for the other gives us a completely different word. Here's the word meat. Switching the M to an N gives us the word neat. This is a minimal pair. The two words differ minimally by one sound only. But what's the point of this? Well, by holding all the other variables constant, we can see if switching the sounds in question changes the meaning of the word. If switching one sound for another changes the meaning, it follows that we're looking at two different words. And if they're two different words, English speakers treat the two sounds in question as different sounds. In this example, N and M are contrasted, and this contrast tells us that N and are two distinct phonemes in English. A phoneme can have different pronunciations. Take the sound K. It comes out with a puff of air in the word kite, but not in the word sky. These two sounds, k and k, are different, but we hear them as variants of the same sound. We call these k and k allophones of the phoneme K. The same goes for N and in the word input. I've heard that word pronounced both input and input, making N and variants of the same sound, allophones of the phoneme N.
So let's take another look at allophones. So we've already talked about phonemes, abstract sound types. And then the phones are the actual versions of these sound types that we produce in real speech. So what are allophones? Well, allophones are phones that are versions of the same phoneme. I know, this is a lot of similar vocabulary altogether. Let's take a look at some visuals here. So in this person's mind, we've got the phoneme. This is their abstract understanding of what is this idea of T in English, the T sound. And then we break it down into these two different phones. Okay, so we've got this one here that is going to be just your T sound without the aspiration. And then here that little H stands for the aspirated T. It's a stronger sound with the puff of air. So it's the difference between T and T, right? So because we don't differentiate between this T and this T when we're thinking about the idea of the sound of the T, we call these two allophones. Over here we break it down even a little bit further. So we talked about the aspiration here and here versus no aspiration. Well, we've got two more allophones. So here we've got a double T, But we still think about it in the same way as the single t sound. We don't say little, we just say little. We also don't think about it, but we're changing it to that flap sound that we discussed earlier. Here, kitten becomes the glottal sound. Kitten, kitten. So in our mind, we're seeing the t sound in all of these words, right? But how do they actually sound? Well, you've got that aspirated t, you've got the regular t, you've got the flap, d, and then you've got the glottal stop, which is hard for me to do. Kitten, kitten. So 4 allophones for the one phoneme. If you pulled this out, you could talk about this as a single phone, right? But when they're all together and they all have the same phoneme that they're related to, then we call them allophones. Phonotactics is kind of a fun subject. So here we're talking about what phonemes can go next to each other and why. And it just has to do with individual languages. So it's hard for us as English speakers to pronounce words in other languages that have different phoneme combinations, such as the ng to start a word. We're very familiar with to end a word, but to start a word, it can be quite tricky. So you can look at the IPA transcription here of the last name that I'm not going to try to pronounce. Maybe I'll try later after the video. And then give it a try. See if you can do it. If you're like me and you're a little nervous, practice along with the video here.
It's Nguyen. I had a friend in high school named Julia Nguyen.
It's not Wayne. No.
It's Nguyen.
It's still wrong. I feel like I just blew your mind.
I've been saying Nguyen since middle school.
When?
Alright, I'll take that.
When?
It's actually Wing.
Wayne?
Wing.
Oh, I don't want to try again.
Wing.
Wang?
Who says Wang? It's Wing.
What? Can you come closer and say it again?
Wing.
Wayne.
You're just saying Wayne now.
I want to crawl into your mouth and figure out where you're holding the word.
Wing.
Wang?
That's actually good. So the thing about the Vietnamese language is that it's a monosyllabic language, so every single word is only one syllable. So wing is one word. So Nguyen is not correct. A lot of the sounds that goes into my last name doesn't really exist in the English language.
Nancy told me how to pronounce her last name last year, and my dentist has the same last name, and I was able to call her Dr. Wynn, and I could tell that it meant a lot to her that I said her last name correctly. Thank you, Nancy.
I've heard my last name butchered in so many different ways that nothing really phases me anymore. We're all learning today. Not really me, but definitely a lot of other people are.
So see how you can do. Give it a try again. You've got and then here you've got a tonal mark. So it shows that you're going from a lower tone, well, the second highest tone actually, to the highest tone in the Vietnamese language. And that's going to happen when you flip through this glottal stop here. So you've got but it's all one syllable. Oh my goodness. Try it. See if you can get it. If you struggle, no problem, because your mind is adapted to these systematic principles of English phonology. And I'm sure you'll do really well with this quick quiz, right? Which of the following words could be a possible word in English? Claff, fcal, flakf, sflack. It was probably pretty easy, right? The only one that rolls off the tongue and that follows our phonological system is the first one, claff, because this blend is very common in English, whereas these two, these two, and then these three do not go well together in English. I also want to talk briefly about co-articulation. It just means that sounds will adapt to other sounds around them. And this has to do with those phonotactics. So because we don't like that PT combination in English, we just adjust. We cut off the P and we start with the T sound, pterodactyl. This is called elision. Another process is inserting a sound segment. So epenthesis is adding an extra sound segment. Here it goes right here to create the word mischievous. I never even noticed it until I was studying up for this lecture, but the word mischievous doesn't have an I in there when you spell it out. We add it because it makes it more comfortable for us to say. And then lastly, if you take words that are from other languages and you adapt them for English, right, it might be a little bit uncomfortable to say chipotle because we don't have this tl combination in English. So I've heard people say chipotle, right? Because that would make more sense, the PL combination than the TL. And children do this all the time, metathesis, just switching around letters to make the word a little bit easier to say. Another type of co-articulation is nasalization, and that has to do with adjusting your vowel sound to make it even a little bit more nasally if it's being followed by an or sound. So she does a great example with the word ham here. And it's interesting because the American is going to use a lot of nasalization, whereas the British English speaker does not. And this is one of the ways you can hear our different accents.
An example with M. Ham. Ham. Again, you can hear the sound as my tongue relaxes down in the back before the lips close for the M sound. Ham. Ham. Minu says it.
Ham.
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 And then some of the effects of co-articulation are that you end up reducing and connecting words, especially in casual speech. So I explicitly teach my students how to speak more like a native, not just so that they sound like a native and people can understand them better, but also so that they're aware that when they listen for speech, people are doing these links. Link a word to another and sound like a native. It's hard for them to hear where each of the words are actually breaking apart. So some other examples: want to becomes wanna, going to changes to gonna. Burgers and fries? No, it's just burgers and fries. So again, it's nice to teach that to them explicitly. One of our last topics here, syllables. Most of you are familiar with this term already, I believe. So a syllable is just a part of a word that contains a vowel or a vowel-like sound. And most common syllables are of this pattern, consonant, vowel. So C stands for consonant, V for vowel. But there are lots of other combinations. You can have a long syllable with 4 different letters in it. You can start with the vowel, 2 consonants, all different kinds of syllable patterns. So you can see the word syllable is broken into 3 syllables. And here you've got a Y, which acts like a vowel. And then over here, you've got that syllabic L that we talked about earlier. So the E is actually silent, and the L is pulling in the schwa sound before it, syllable, bowls.